Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start in 1 minute. If you mind to join us in this main room as people are coming. So, first of all, I would like to welcome you to the Wisekey Davos event. This is an event that we have been doing for 17 years. I remember the first time when we started to bring issues such as cybersecurity, identity management into the discussion. This year is a year which is very exciting as we are also covering issues related to the Web 3.0, the metaverse, NFTs, satellites, and so on. But before we start with the official program of Wisekey, I would like to once again host the TechAccord Roundtable. This is something we have done in the last 3 editions, so with the break, obviously, of the COVID break. And the TechAccord is an initiative where Wisekey is very proud to be. It is an initiative launched a few years ago that now includes 150 global technology companies to advance responsible behavior and discourage escalation in conflict in cyberspace. So we as a cybersecurity company, we have a responsibility to secure the internet. We do have a responsibility to work among ourselves and combine our talents as a way to provide a unique response and a strong response to the problems that the society is facing. I have the honor to have with me today Mr. Brad Smith, President and Vice Chair of Microsoft, an amazing visionary, a writer as well. His book, it is actually a reference to everything that's happening now. So I would like to start this evening by just welcome him together with the rest of the group and give him the microphone for our initial keynote. Brad, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. The good news for everybody is that keynote is probably too big a word for the few thoughts that I'll offer at the beginning. But first, let me just say thank you to you and to Wisekey. I've had the chance to be here before. Thank you to the people who are part of this panel who are doing great work, and you'll hear more from them. I just would just offer 2 thoughts about where we are today and why I think this conversation is so important. The first is I really feel that with the passage of time, the principles that are in the TechAccord, have proven to be even more important. There's fundamentally 4 principles, but it really starts with the notion that those of us who work in the tech sector have a responsibility to work together to defend our customers from cyber attacks from other people. It's fundamentally about the defensive role that we play in the world, that we refrain from helping governments attack innocent civilians, that we work together, to build capacity and to respond when people are in need. And it was a great thing when it started. It has become, I think, even better over time because people like the ones you're going to hear from have made it real. They've taken on specific projects. We've worked together around the world. And it has led to pragmatic benefits. And that's why we're up to 150 signatories from, I think it's 29 countries. It's quite a substantial number. So this is an international coalition of the tech sector. But the second thing I would just highlight is that I think as we come together in 2022, this is in fact more important than ever. We fashioned all of this, frankly, with this view that there was this level of hostility in cyberspace that was taking place nonetheless at a time when the world was at peace. And cyber attacks didn't feel like peace, but they were also a step short of war, at least as it was conventionally and commonly understood. But what we're seeing in Ukraine is a real war that has added cyber attacks in a coordinated way to attacks that involve cruise missiles and artillery shells and tanks and troops on the ground. And so we're seeing cyber weapons being used to augment and coordinate with other forms of attacks as well. And of course, some of this is against Ukrainian military targets, but most of it is not. As we've been working with the Ukrainian government, most of the attacks are in fact against what we would regard as civilian targets, civilian parts of the government, IT companies like those that have signed the tech accord, banks, agriculture companies, airports, nuclear power plants. You know, in so many instances, we've either seen distinct attacks designed to destroy computers with wiper software to destroy all the data onto hard disks, whether it be data or applications and operating systems. We've seen attacks coordinated to take down a network to make it easier to then take down a site by sending in troops or by bombing something like an airfield. So this is something we haven't had to deal with before. And frankly, it is now the world in which we will always live. One where we have to protect people in times of peace, and then we have to defend them even more in times of war. Interestingly, and the last thing I'll say is, if you really talk to people who for the last 180 years have been focused on humanitarian needs and humanitarian obligations in times of war, it's really been about the role of governments. Governments fight wars, not companies. And if you talk to the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, which is really the creator of the first and all four of the Geneva Conventions, they would say, well, you know, usually when there's a war, all the businesses leave. And in some ways that has been true in this war. There have been businesses who've left Russia. But you know, cyberspace is not a territorial space the way that the land or the sea or the air is. It spans around the world. There are many days where, as I've said, the front line in the cyber war between Russia and Ukraine actually runs through Seattle, where our threat intelligence experts work. Tech companies don't get to leave a cyber war the way companies and businesses leave conventional wars. Our customers depend on us to continue to help protect and defend them. So everything that we have been talking about the last few years, frankly, everything that Wisekey first brought here to Davos 17 years ago is no less important, it is more. So a huge thanks to what everybody's doing. A huge thanks to all of you who've been part of this. Every year I think, wow, it's hard to imagine this becoming even more important or more dramatic, and for better and mostly for worse, every year it does. So it needs us even more. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Brad. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I know that you're very busy. It is very reassuring for us to have somebody like you and Microsoft in the line of defense, and I think everybody needs companies with your leadership to solve very complex problems. Then 17 years ago we started to see coming, but now they are there. So thank you very much for your support. Thank you, Brad. All the best. So thank you very much. I will just encourage the team in the back, if you don't mind, to join us as a way not to use the background, just having conversations, because we get the noise here. So thank you very much for the panel. And again, we are all very proud to be part of this Tech Accord initiative. I have an amazing panel. I have actually the chance to have Alissa back with us. You were 3 years ago, VP Global Head of Public Policy and Cloudflare. We have also Jimmy Collier, Senior Threat Intelligence Advisor, Mandiant. We have John Clay, VP of Intelligence, TrendMicro. And we have Mark Hughes, President of Security, DXC Technology. I'm going to repeat again, please. Gentlemen, you mind to, or otherwise we close the door, huh? If you don't mind, because I'm getting the background noise. Maybe, do you mind to close the door, David? David, you just maybe close the door, is easier. Okay, so I'm going to start with a set of questions that have been prepared by several experts, as we want to go as deep as we can on the subject. I'm going to start with Alissa. So the tech industry has unique insights into the cyber dimension of this conflict, which we are facing in Ukraine. What kind of activities have your company observed leading up and then during the invasion of Ukraine? Any factual details on how you have been handling that situation?
Sure, thank you, and thank you for having me here.
Sure.
You know, I think one of the things that we've seen in the Ukraine conflict is that there is a bit of a narrative that there haven't been many cyber conflicts, and I think to some degree that's true, but it's not entirely true. And I think this panel is actually a really interesting piece, because what we have seen is that this hybrid warfare idea. So I think when people are thinking about cyber attacks, they're thinking about things that are debilitating in and of themselves. And I don't think that's what we've seen. I think what we've seen are sort of disruptive attacks. And I want to give a few examples. So in the lead up to the invasion, one of the things that we saw relatively early on, even before the invasion actually started, was a series of DDoS attacks. And we saw them sort of popping up in different places, and they weren't particularly sophisticated attacks, but they were on things like banks and critical infrastructure, and things that actually matter to real people. So if the site goes down, it has an effect on real people. And I think you can ask yourself, what is the intention of an attack like that? But ultimately, it sort of felt like there was an intent to make the population worry, right? Things are going to work. Things aren't going to work. Things are going to be a problem, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I want to give another example, because I think, again, this idea of a blended attack is a really interesting one. So one of the things that we saw, so actually after that piece, we actually realized we could play a role. So I will say, we realized that the kind of company that we are, we could actually help prevent a lot of those attacks. So we reached out to a bunch of Ukrainian organizations and started onboarding, so we could actually make sure those attacks didn't have an effect. And then I guess I want to push a little later in the conflict. So early May, one of the things that we saw was that the Russians started occupying different places in Ukraine. And we saw that they occupied Kherson. And one of the things we saw, if you were watching sort of connectivity in Kherson, you saw the connectivity drop off. So the idea of an internet shutdown as a tool of war, potentially, so that people couldn't get access. And then what happened next was really interesting. If you were watching, if you're in the sort of network space and you understand how traffic flows, you saw the traffic get rerouted. So instead of going through the normal course, it started going through Russian telecoms, which have a lot of different screening mechanisms on them, which actually can change what individuals see. So just to give an example of things that you saw, none of those are things that are debilitating cyber attacks. They aren't what people have in mind as, we've seen something that's a significant cyber attack, but they certainly had an effect on the conflict.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I remember a few years ago when Estonia got what we call the first, was a cyber war or cyber attack. What is the difference between what happened then in Estonia and what is happening now with this hybrid model? Maybe I give you that question, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Estonia, it was a denial of service attack. There wasn't anything, I think now we would look at that and say it's not, particularly interesting in many ways, aside from the broader geopolitical context. I think it was interesting on those DDoS attacks we saw more recently, is that they were actually combined with SMS campaigns. So you had Russian operators effectively sending texts to Ukrainian citizens. So again, they're checking that their bank is offline. They are worried. It's the psychological impact that we're now seeing increasingly interwoven into cyber operations. And I think if you look at some of the operations we're seeing in Ukraine right now, it's a combination of different types of cyber operations taking place in conjunction. So you might see a website defaced at the same time that, say, wiper malware is being deployed. And it's to create that disruptive impact, but an impact that has psychological repercussions for the population as a whole.
And do you think because the technology is exponential and we obviously have advanced enormously in each of those components of the technology, and those attacks are more relevant now, are more difficult to mitigate?
I mean, I don't know if they're necessarily more difficult to mitigate. I think we can be really optimistic about the progress we're making as well. If you look at some of the malware that we've detected that's targeted cyber-physical systems and operational technology and industrial control systems, we've actually been able to detect and prevent a lot of that in the country. So despite that being a sector that's increasingly digitalizing, we can make progress, and I think we can be optimistic at the same time.
Very good. Mark, in terms of the norms, I mean, governments are obviously copying from other government best practices on how to defend themselves. What are the most essential norms or responsible state behavior that should be guided government cyber operation, especially amid armed conflict?
Well, the UN has talked a lot about the norms that are being established, and we hear a lot about that, and clearly that hasn't necessarily been the case at all, because a lot of the adoption of those norms we haven't yet seen taken up. But there are some ground rules that we've been successful. A lot of things people say that we haven't been successful in, but actually to establish some ground rules and those norms have been successful. It's the execution and take-up of that, which I think is where we need to see it. And we need to think of those in the context of what Brad was saying as far as the ICRC and the work on the convention is concerned, in terms of the fact that cyber is now a domain, if you want, as it's often referred to in this type of conflict, alongside sort of, land, sea, air, and everything else. And we're seeing, I think, the point around this is that how you then adopt those norms in this new domain is going to be critical, and we need to accelerate towards that quickly. And I think in some respects, the conflict that we're seeing and the way in which those norms are becoming more obvious about how that should be done. And of course, they're sort of quite straightforward when you think about it. But to sort of pick one or two about, we should attack our capability for life type services like water, like healthcare, for example. And those are things that I think that we should really concentrate on now, accelerating, as we can see the impact of this type of stuff, especially because the sort of things that we've been seeing are quite availability focused. So they've been denying capability to allow things to work. And that is, when we think about the norms, that's exactly what they're at. So what I think we should be calling for and seeing now, even during the conflict, but certainly now coming together much more to say, let's take those norms and let's actually make them happen, because there is a mutual benefit to having this work. And it's not like this is the first time we've seen this either. I think we have mentioned Estonia, we've talked about Georgia, we've talked about other conflict areas. We haven't necessarily seen the integration of cyber in the domain in the way in which we've seen it this time, but it's not brand new. And I think the urgency, therefore, to take up those norms and actually get on and execute them and put them in place has never been greater.
And in terms of the norms, is any information sharing process between organizations, enterprises, about what you are personally learning inside your own organization?
Absolutely. So, at DXC we have a lot of ability to, a lot of customers that we work with globally, and through things like the Tech Accord. It's not just me, I'm not just saying here because I'm sitting here today, but it genuinely is the case that we're seeing now sharing happening in all sorts of different ways. And let's not forget, at DXC we had a number of thousands of staff in Ukraine, and so let's not forget the people. We're going to start with people here, and about how we managed specifically to ensure that we brought our staff to safety and moved them to safe locations and make sure that they continue to operate as well. And it's been an unbelievable response from the staff themselves. So sharing information, not just on the level of cyber, because it's what we're here to talk about, but also other things as well. How do you deal with the conundrum where potentially banking systems aren't available? How do you pay people and all the rest of it? Things like that, very practical considerations as well. So it's not just information sharing about the things that we're really bothered about on this panel, and more broadly around cyber, and how we can use that information to actually detect. And I think that's probably the one area where, when we talk about information sharing, that is detecting those signals that allow us then to concentrate our effort to be able to ensure that the effects that are trying to be achieved can't be achieved, is probably the area where I've seen information sharing being most practical. But it's many different aspects of information sharing.
Very good, thank you very much. John, what kind of cooperation is needed moving forward between governments and the technology industry and other stakeholders to detect reckless and irresponsible behavior in cyberspace, while accepting it as a new domain of conflict that is there to stay?
Yeah, Mark already talked a little bit about the sharing aspect. Obviously, governments need to look at how are they going to deal with cyber in a hybrid warfare type of atmosphere. The sharing process is really critical for, especially on cyber, because government doesn't have access to all of the data and where the data is coming from and what type of data is out there. Whereas a lot of us in the private industry, we have customers that are affected in these regions, and we can obtain that intelligence, that threat intelligence, and then share it among, whether it's among the industry, like we've done with the wipers. If you saw the wipers, they were shared out to everybody, so you could get those IOCs and you could protect your network from those. But we can also share those with the government, and I think that's, we're starting to see more and more private public partnerships coming about, whether it's through the Cyber Tech Accord or whether it's through other capabilities and organizations. But it's critical because you're not going to see everything in a cyber war. We don't see everything that Mandiant sees. We don't see everything that DXC sees or Cloudflare sees. But between all of us, we can provide very good protection and capabilities and intelligence to the governments and to private industries. So the more we can affect that, and the more we can build upon what we've started here through this process, I think is going to be better off for everybody.
Absolutely. So, Alissa, during 9/11, one of the criticisms was the information was not shared, right? And the agencies were very slow in informing other agencies about the threats. Has that changed now? Are we more efficient now?
You know, I think there's been a pretty significant effort to think about how we can share, including actually some efforts at WEF. I think one of the things that we've seen a lot is there's a recognition of exactly that point, right? There's a recognition that a lot of what happens and the visibility is in the private sector, but a lot of the action potentially is on the government side. And I think we are starting to learn new ways to do that. I think one thing to sort of flag on the cyber sharing side, we have to think about ways of doing it across borders effectively where it doesn't raise broader concerns, right? So we're not talking about sharing personal data. We're not talking about we're thinking about sharing things that are potentially effective. And I think it's a very important piece because we need to build systems and muscles that enable us to do it. I also actually just quickly want to jump in on the norms point. I think one thing that is worth thinking about on the norms piece, particularly in the conflict area, there are norms around armed conflict that have been around for a very long time. So if you think about international humanitarian law and sort of underlying principles of being proportionate in your targeting, making sure that it's necessary and proportionate from a military necessity standpoint. Not targeting civilians, right? These are all concepts that can be applied. I think the point, though, is it's very challenging to figure out how they apply in cyberspace and to what extent there's overlap. And I think that's the work that needs to be done. I think this conflict will help draw it out in some ways.
One of the, go ahead.
Yeah, and conversely, I'll pick up on the information sharing as well. And I think this is something that many, governmental organizations are recognizing. If you see, I'm sure many people will be familiar with the work that CISA's done recently with the JCDC in terms of absolutely recognizing that, it was only a few years ago that we were really fumbling around, I'd say, as an industry, perhaps many in the room here, about, well, who do you go to? And each one had a slightly different response in terms of which pick your agency, and not just, I'm not just talking about the US, I'm talking about many others as well. And you can see two things I think are happening as far as information sharing is concerned. One is that more clear lines of actual sharing. And then secondly, also when that information is being shared, that the response now is less one of, you must share it so we can just suck it up, but actually one much more of, there is actually we need you in with others, and I think it's back to what John was saying about how the fact that we as private industry, where most of this exists, then come together to working with governments in a way in which that can be done, and there is a reciprocal essence to that as well, not just being a one-way. It felt a few years ago that it was very much a one-way track. So that sharing piece I think is easier, but frankly, we've got a long way to go yet, because some of the things that we've seen, not just in the context of this hybrid conflict, but also in other events that we've seen, is we're still fumbling around a bit. We still think that in some cases it's certain companies know a lot, and they do, but often it's not the biggest companies who know the critical pieces of information. So how do we broaden that out to make sure that that can be brought to the fore as necessary? So long way to go yet, I think, but progress.
Yeah, and I would just add one thing. You mentioned the one way. Government does need to come back to private and give us information that they have as well as part of this conflict, because it is going to be a two-way street, and that's going to help everybody. Because one-way streets don't work very well. Two-way streets are a much better option especially in cyber.
I think the last thing to say on this as well is that not all information is created equal. And actually, I'm a bit skeptical of the term information sharing, because when we look at a lot of organizations that really need help with cybersecurity right now, they don't necessarily have the resources and the capacity right now to take a load of logs or whatever sort of information we're talking about and process it and analyze it. So I think, you know, I prefer looking at it in terms of building a collective view of intelligence, where we're looking at, you know, the unique capability of each organization, as we've discussed, where there's missing gaps, how we can all work together, but not just work together in the collection piece of that, but in the analysis and the synthesis, so that what we're providing is something that's really actionable. It's, you know, we could look at, say, indicators of compromise, or we could look at something like a Yara rule that potentially allows us to be more proactive in discovering threats. So I think if we can take on a lot of that heavy lifting as industry, you know, we can really empower the entire community.
I remember when I was in the UN, I've been 15 years in the UN on the cybersecurity team, and one of the things we were forbidding actually was to talk to private sector, because the UN only talks to international organizations and government. That has changed. I know that Tech Accord has been instrumental in creating the bridges with international organizations in Paris, in New York, and other. Don't you think that we have now the capability to create something, an early warning system on cybersecurity, so the attacks are less destroyable? I mean, those attacks still today than we are facing in critical infrastructure, hospital. They are damaging attacks. Can we, with the technology we have, limit the destruction that those attacks generate?
Well, I think all of us have support like the Cyber Tech Accord, which is do no harm, but also protect your customers. Yeah. And that's what we all do for our customers, is we're gonna throw out and make sure they're protected. And again, we pull that information, whether it's from the government sharing or the private sector sharing that information to us, and we share that to our customers to make sure they're protected from day one. So like the wipers I mentioned before, we got those IOCs, we put those out, and all of our customers are protected at that point. You mentioned, you know, can that things be done? So CISA, we mentioned CISA earlier. They've just put out the known exploitable vulnerability database, where they are now adding in vulnerabilities. And I know the private sector is submitting a lot of those exploits and vulnerabilities that are being actively exploited. So the 0 days aren't 0 days anymore, and they become end days. Yeah. So those kind of programs, I think, are going to be key to helping minimize the damage that happens out there, for sure. And then the use of AI, you guys have a lot of the AI stuff over AI and machine learning. Those technologies are fabulous at helping identify unknown threats. The pattern matching that was done years and years ago in the industry helps, but it's not as good for the unknown type of threats that are going out there. So as we start deploying those newer technologies, those new next generation technologies, those will also improve the ability for companies to help that.
But AI requires data, efficient data, and high quality data, right? So are data, cybersecurity data depositories available where AI can do some analysis? Do they exist?
They do. There is a number of those available today, and again, if you, I know at least in the U.S. federal government, there's some CISA and some of the other agencies have some databases that are accessible. The other nice thing that government has done is put on regulations in terms of making sure that these IOCs are in a format that can be pulled in by any organization. So that's another role that government can play, is help put standards out there and regulations out there to make sure the threat intelligence sharing process is very efficient and very clean. And so MITRE framework, the framework that they're doing now, attack framework, is fabulous for information sharing. So you can go to MITRE attack framework, put in one of the attack groups, and it'll give you all of the information that they are, you know, how they do their attacks, what they use in their attacks. All of that is available to anybody in the world.
Amazing. Please.
I think I want to add on to that. I think, you know, one of the challenges I think that we see in the space is that you're now talking about sophisticated actors often, right? And I think one of the things that's important to us as a company are that tools are available to a lot of different people. And so, you know, we have a huge range of services, and one of the things that we try to do is we try to make them easily accessible. We want a small NGO to be able to protect themselves. That is really important to us. And I think, you know, often when we get into the world of cybersecurity, it sounds, we're talking about, you know, sophisticated IOCs, we're talking about APTs, we're talking about all these things that, you know, your normal, you know, mom and pop shop or your normal small business doesn't understand. And so how do we as a group, right, how do we take tools and make sure not only that it's information sharing, but that it's accessible and that it's tools that somebody can implement relatively easily, and that it's not just large enterprises that have background, because those aren't the only people who are attacked, right? So we, in the context of Ukraine, we have a program where we provide free services to civil society groups, and we have more than 100 in Ukraine on purpose or in the Ukraine in the region, because we want to make sure that they don't suffer the same kinds of attacks, because if they go down, that's a problem too. And so I think it's tool sets, it's information sharing. I think it's all the things that we've been talking about all combined.
One of the things that is happening actually now, and we saw that many years ago in the UN, is that the internet is being fractionate. Basically, the internet in China is not the same than internet anywhere else. So with that complexity of the internet becoming like not anymore an internet, but kind of extranet, how can we protect users and organizations? I mean, we could develop mechanisms in China that could be impossible to track because they are using different IPs. So any of you have views on that?
I think from my side, it's always worth remembering, regardless of what's going on, where an adversary is based, they're coming after our network.
Yeah.
And that actually gives us a unique advantage because it's effectively our home turf. We've got the visibility there. We are in control of the different security mechanisms, the different security controls that we can introduce there. So I think focusing very much on ourselves and taking responsibility there and feeling empowered that actually if we understand how the adversaries can move through that attack life cycle, move through our networks, if we can take that information and use it to invest in the right areas and to have that focus. I think we talk a lot about the latest and greatest scary threat. I think we also need to talk about eliminating some of the distraction in the industry. But if we can get that focus, and connect our security resources to the threat landscape, then we're in a place where we can be really proactive and be ready for those threats.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I'll add on to that too. Sorry, not to talk again.
Sure. Love it.
I think the other thing that is really important, more from the government side, is that we recognize that we need information sharing across borders, and we need mechanisms for governments to work with each other. So what you don't want is governments sort of hunkering down, not having conversations with other governments, because that isn't going to protect any of them, right? I think that the idea has to be that cyberspace, like many things, is across borders, and that means governments have to work together across borders to protect people. And I think we all sort of recognize that in our various companies. I think, and governments recognize it too, but I think it's sometimes a harder slog.
Yeah.
I think again, we've seen quite a lot actually recently in the sort of those conglomerates of communities, US, UK, Canada, Australia and co, where you've seen quite a lot of joint announcements. Even in the last couple of days, we've seen lots of those things, especially around Ukraine. The wipe stuff, they all came out as joint things, which I think is a step in the right direction. But there's a lot more to the world than just that. So as we well know, so really encouraging that now, fostering that to make sure that we expand that and it becomes much more extensible, I think is really, really important. And I think hopefully will be more. So there is some stuff happening, but there's a long way to go yet.
You actually postulated something very interesting as a tactic potentially. If a country can sever their internet access to the world and still operate internally inside that country, that could be a good mechanism to keep external actors from targeting their citizens or targeting their businesses or whatever. So, but most of us know the internet isn't set up that way, and it's it's probably almost impossible. China may be the closest to that, but yeah, I think in terms of just keeping the world moving and keeping people in, being able to get information and run businesses and processes, that is going to be a challenge for the foreseeable future.
One of the things the Tech Accord I think is unique is that it brings big companies, small companies, SMEs working together in a collaborative sharing information, sharing technology approach, which I think is one of the reasons why it's growing. I mean, out of the 150 companies, members, there is a lot of small, medium-sized enterprises such as Wisekey, which learns from you guys on many things and then obviously help us to defend our clients. Is that something that you see as as something that needs to be accelerated? What is your view individually as a big company is dealing with the small, medium-sized enterprises and private sector?
Well, one of the reasons we became a founding member of the Cyber Tech Accord is because the intention is to bring in organizations from all over the world and all types of industries. So it's not just a cybersecurity tech accord, right? It comprises of businesses that have nothing to do with cybersecurity, but they can bring their own types of information and knowledge to the tech accord, the others in the tech accord, to help improve cybersecurity around the world. The other aspect, obviously, is the ability to support the government discussions and get governments discussing cybersecurity in a way that has to be discussed, especially now that we've got hybrid warfare, cyber warfare actually happening. That's a huge part of that needs to be addressed by government, but government needs advice, and the advice can come from these small, medium, and large businesses, for sure.
The thing I would add to that on the tech accord side, I agree with all that. I think the thing I would add to that on the tech accord side, and I think one of the sort of objectives of the tech accord going into the norms conversation was they set up a set of principles that a lot of different companies can agree to. And the idea is if you have enough private sector companies, and not just the big companies, the small companies, the medium-sized companies, agreeing to a set of principles that you weren't going to be used for attack purposes, right? That you're going to protect all your customers everywhere, which is one of those concepts, that you're going to be sharing, you're building something bigger than yourself. So the idea that I think all of us, from a company standpoint, you look at those principles and you think, that's something that I agree to, that our companies agree to, that we want to be part of, and that's a big deal. And I think you realize you have a collective voice that's bigger than just a single company.
Yeah. Alissa, you made the point earlier as well. I mean, I think that purpose is a really strong unifying thing, and one of the reasons why we're so keen to be involved in that. But also, you made the point earlier about how you flow down, and you were saying about, Carlos, about how you flow down technology to make it easier to consume. And let's face it, as a security industry more broadly, we're very good at dreaming up new stuff and layering in more controls and seemingly making it more complex. I see that there is a real tipping point, and a lot of our customers, even large enterprises, really struggle with that, as we all know. Boy, when you get down into smaller organizations when faced with that. So I see a natural evolution to your question, I think, is about how do we actually bake in more of those things that are the must-dos. And for any of us involved in the security space, there's lots of things you can do. And I'm sure Jamie will tell us more than anyone here that actually when being involved in the sort of things that Mandiant are involved in, when you come down to it, there are a few things that seem to trip up most organizations all the time. And if only we did those things a lot better, then we could create a much better, more secure environment. And I think it's those sorts of things where we, again, as a tech accord, need to look at how do we provision and make sure that those sets of tools are perhaps easier to consume, more available to those customers, and not only to customers but also to others as well. And yes, there'll always be a place for much more sophisticated AI correlation, contextualized threat intelligence that allows you to do things depending, but at least you'll perhaps deal with a lot more of the noise in the system, which is more the lower level stuff that we see quite a lot of as well, by having that technical capability more in the fabric of the sort of IT services generally across the sort of member organizations of the Tech Accord.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly echo all of that, and I think actually security is a lot more boring than the security industry would have you believe. Often the attacks aren't that exciting. Often we see the same things happen time and time again. And that is actually room for optimism, because as Mark said, there's a small number of security controls, small number of things we can do that have an outsized impact. And I think if we stay true to that, that's really important. And to your points earlier, Alissa, about making the tools accessible, providing a simple message. It's very easy for us to get overexcited about AI in cybersecurity, about supply chain compromise, the latest and greatest attack vector. But there are these kind of quite simple messages that we should be promoting. I think on the broader point on SMEs and the role of the Tech Accord, I think it's also to challenge governments in some ways. I think if you look at that cyber policy community, there's a lot of progress we've made, but I think you could ask some pretty piercing questions on what they've done for the network defense community, which is slightly different, a layer down. And I think what the industry voice can really do is to try and keep that community honest and talk about, well, what do network defenders What do incident responders, what do red teams, what do they need from the cyber policy community? And that's really, if we can kind of build, I think, if you went to Davos 10 years ago, there probably wasn't many cybersecurity talks, but they would be talking about public-private collaboration. They'd be saying the same things that we say now, getting to a slightly more operational view, a slightly more pragmatic view that's really serious on the details. I think that's what industry can bring.
I think actually 10 years ago, even 17 years ago, the cybersecurity was viewed not as an essential thing to be worried about it. Even big companies, at that time preferred to put money on advertising than cybersecurity. Obviously, the situation had changed. Do you think I give you a good example here in Switzerland. Switzerland is now a member of NATO, is not in the European Union cybersecurity backend, it's not a member of the UK, United States backend. It's actually alone, right, in front of a very big battle, and this is a very rich society with financial institutions. Many counties have been hacked in the last 6 months. We had hacks at the county level because we, as a country, this is not a decentralized country. Do you think this type of governments can do it themselves, or rather just say, look, take care of my cybersecurity concerns. I cannot handle that. I don't have the people, the infrastructure, and sometimes the officials to do so. Do you think this is going to happen in the future? Small countries are going to be requesting help from companies like yours and us to assist them in protecting them?
Well, I think they already do, and increasingly so. But I think there's a very clear distinction that we must always draw: country, small country, count on or county or not, which is, and large enterprise equally, is whose risk is it? So there's one thing that you can never outsource, and that is the risk, because it ultimately is the risk. And understanding how then you can contextualize, because we often use terms like threats and risks slightly interchangeably. You have threats, you then have an entity that is operating. How you match those threats then leads to, well, what risk does that pose to you? And that whole process of working that through and understanding what that is, and then creating the control framework where you can get organizations like the ones represented here to then do a lot of that work, to then provide the actionable intelligence within that risk framework. But ultimately, that first part, which I see many organizations slightly off, sometimes trying to make the mistake of saying, just do everything. It doesn't work like that, because ultimately there is that need to really be able to understand and contextualize what you're doing. But the straight answer to the question is, yep, we already do. I think that will increase. I think there are, as I said, some of those tools, especially in the more perhaps sophisticated end of when you correlate stuff, there's tooling in there that requires skills that are quite scarce. And so that it just stands to reason that where you can scale and have that operational capability of understanding, where someone like us, like DXC, we have literally thousands of people doing this stuff. Even a large enterprise, which isn't an IT services company like we are, might only have one or two. And in the current job market and everything else, it might be very hard to retain that type of skill. So just through necessity, we see that. But with the caveat that even when we have that level of concentration of skill, you always end up with the point that the risk ultimately belongs to whether it's a canton, county, public organization, and that's how that work has to be contextualized.
Any other views?
I would concur with that. We as an organization provide managed services to our customers, and these customers are anything from small business all the way to very large enterprise, because you talked about the scarcity. I think we have 4 million job openings in cybersecurity worldwide right now, so there's a huge scarcity in that. And then if you break that down into the threat hunting group, the threat hunters who are trying to actually find these threats inside the networks, it's a very small percentage of people that have that skill set. So they are, even the very large enterprises are coming to the experts who have that managed service ability, have the experts that they've trained for years to actually monitor their network, and they monitor the other customer network, and they're monitoring government networks for this, because governments are in the same boat that private industry is. They have lack of resources, lack of funding, lack of skills, personnel. So you're definitely going to see it grow in the future. As it's just like you can break business into small, medium, and large enterprise. You can do the same with governments. There's small governments, medium-sized governments, and large governments. But all of them are going to still need those capabilities.
One question about kinetics attacks. I mean, attacks that you can see with tanks, bombs are obviously very impressive and people realize about the danger. But cyber attacks are silent. You don't see it. So where from your experience those cyber attacks are mainly happening? What are the sectors that they are being cyber attacked? Is that infrastructure? Is that hospitals? Is that power plants? Where you think we are now and where we're going to be? Whoever wants to answer that.
First, I would disagree that the attacks are silent or not seen, because just take a look at ransomware. If you get hit with ransomware, there's a big thing on your screen that says you've been ransomed by Conti or by Revel or somebody like that. So it's definitely, if ransomware is the most visible threat that I've ever seen. I've been in cybersecurity for 25 years. I've never seen anything similar to that, but you know, we're seeing it all over the place. I mean, every industry is being targeted, but there are a few industries that are being targeted more than others. Financial, because they got a lot of money, but government, education, and those are two of the really bad ones, because they are probably the biggest shortages of personnel. They got the worst budgets to be able to support a cybersecurity platform or something. So that's where it's all over the place, though. The criminals don't care where you are. They will target you if you can pay money.
I'd say as well, absolutely. I mean, almost going one stage further. I mean, we talk in the triumvirate of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And obviously, we've seen a big shift in the cyber landscape from confidentiality targeted attacks, where, you know, often in the past people would say, well, you know, okay, yes, information was lost, but I've still got it, because, you know, copies were taken. So there was that sort of almost slightly can't quite get a hold of it. As John was just saying, ransomware, availability type of attacks, it's pretty obvious. It doesn't work. But let's go one stage further, because then taking it to the real nub of this, the kinetic type of outcome. We have seen that. We've seen the water valve manipulation, for example. I think it was in the US. We've seen a blast furnace. That's a few years ago now, but nonetheless. So we have seen, absolutely. Well, Estonia we saw as well. We talked earlier about DDoS, but again, that's maybe slightly different. But there are actual outcomes, physical, destructive outcomes of cyber. They are well documented. They are there. I don't think they're going away. And whilst I have the microphone, I'm just going to talk about the I. No one talks about integrity. No one talks about, what about if threat actors now, instead of just stopping stuff from working or just stealing information, manipulated certain pieces and said, look, you don't know that you can't trust your data any longer in the same way, or you can't trust this or can't trust that. You know, things have been manipulated and changed, and so the integrity of some of the data has been undermined, unless, you know, there's an extortion play there as well. Well, there we go. There we go. So, you know, lots of different aspects of, but certainly a lot of kinetic happening.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think the integrity piece, we have seen a little bit more of it, right? You've seen people try to get into people's accounts and change content. So it can be a really powerful thing to break into someone's account using a cyber attack and then use social media, for example, to disseminate a message that they didn't put in, right? There are a lot of things that you can do in that space. I think, you know, I sort of smiled when you said industry, because I think what you realize is that the possibilities are across the board, and it sort of depends on the actors. So if you're a criminal actor, what do you want, right? Or if you're a nation state, what do you want? If you start looking at that and thinking about it from a motivation standpoint, you know, if you're a kid who's just trying to be disruptive, what's the likelihood? It can almost hit anyone. I think that's the challenge. That doesn't mean that's not a scare tactic. I don't mean it as that, actually. I think that it's just an understanding that this is a tool set, as with many other things, that can be used for lots of different purposes.
I think the challenge then becomes, you know, there's threats across all industries. It's to actually delve into what that means for my organization. Whether it's a different sector, but even within the same sector, if I'm leading an energy or utilities organization right now, the risk profile within Ukraine would be completely different to, say, the Middle East. We're talking about completely different threat groups.
Totally.
Russia or Iran, for instance. So, you know, while some of the threats are universal or they are sector agnostic, some ransomware groups are like that, for example. Other ransomware groups are incredibly focused on certain sectors. So I think, again, it's if we can educate ourselves on the specific risks and the specific areas of concern for our industry, again, it goes back to that point of focus, and we can actually strip away a lot of the things that maybe we don't need to be so concerned about.
I would just add, I kind of threw out the misinformation, disinformation campaigns, because we saw those early on in the conflict. Because if I can mislead the citizenry in what's actually occurring, it helps me out, right? We also are starting to see deep fakes. So if I think about deep faking the leader of a country who's dealing with something, and you throw that out, and it's total misinformation campaign. So I think, in the future, when we think about a hybrid conflict, besides DDoSing and doing wipers, you're going to see misinformation, disinformation campaigns starting very, very early in the process. The other thing I would mention is Ukraine experienced an attack against their energy grid and the energy sector years ago by Russia, and that was probably a precursor in them learning and teaching themselves how to do that in the future. And that's one of the things we're seeing with critical infrastructure, is we're seeing a lot of attacks that aren't necessarily, they're not destructive. They get in, they do something, they figure it out, and then they're gone. They're not looking to be destructive, but they're learning, and it's education-based. So that's what I get scared about when I start seeing those types of attacks that aren't really attacks. They're just get in, get out, and just learn what's happening.
The issue of trust is an essential issue. I think the latest development, for instance, of Kaspersky, don't use them because they might be connected to the Russians on the antivirus. It's where do we inspire ourselves to define who is whom and who is doing what?
I think, again, it goes back to that point of taking responsibility, right?
Yeah.
It's looking at what we can do on our network, right? There's a lot of these questions flying around on all sides of the globe, whether it's for American companies, Russian companies, et cetera. But I think, I think for me, if we can, take it back to the basics, going back to those kind of common security controls, things like that, I think that's just where we should be focusing on.
And maybe the role of the international organizations, because this is exactly the objective, original design of them, right? To be interoperable in what concerns trust. I mean, when you go to the United Nations, you have Chinese, Russians, American, all sitting in the same Security Council, right? The name security says. So I think the exchange of interoperability between those countries is important, and we need to get there somewhere. Yeah. Any views on that? Maybe I don't know if you work in Promenade in the last days, but you see it everywhere, the metaverse, the Web 3.0, the NFTs, and it's a young generation which are so innovative and coming with those amazing ideas. But when you ask them about cybersecurity questions, they say, what? Cybersecurity? No, I am not concerned about that. Well, the Web 3.0 is only an extension of the Web 2.0, so they aren't going to inherit the same issues that we have. Are your companies involved in anything of that? Are you thinking on how you're going to basically protect the cybersecurity of the next generation of the internet?
Well, I actually think we're seeing some positive signals there. I mean, some of those specific areas like the metaverse make me already feel like I'm a very old man because I don't understand any of it, and I'm very skeptical about it all. But I think it's reasonable to assume that people aren't going to be interested in cybersecurity. I don't think we should expect people to really engage with our space. I think what we want to do is to make it as easy as possible. Yeah. When I first had an iPhone back however long that was, I had to kind of request a software update. Right now, my phone is telling me we are going to update your software overnight unless you explicitly tell me not to, effectively. So making it easy, making it seamless, different ways to log in that make it easy.
Yeah.
Face ID, all of those sorts of things that are making it seamless, making it easy. I think that's where we need to go.
Yeah. I remember when cars came into the society, there were a lot of accidents because people didn't have driving license. There were no red lights. There was not even brakes. So a lot of people die. And then slowly we started to realize that a car was a dangerous thing, and you have to regulate, put traffic lights, driving license. And people started to adopt all those measures and reduce the risk. I think this is basically applied to the same thing on cybersecurity, right? We have to educate because a lot of the issues related to cybersecurity cybersecurity, for instance, what I mentioned before on the attacks we had in Switzerland, is because the government officials working in these organizations were really totally ignorant in what concerns any cybersecurity risk. You know, they didn't change their passwords, they leave their email open, endless issues. Yep.
Just to pick up on one thing about that world, you know, what we have to, people don't necessarily compute this, which is, remember, us as identity, us as me sitting here as my identity, this will, in the very near future, my identity, the majority of my identity won't be this.
Yeah. We're an avatar.
It's my, you know, it's my virtual identity in some way, shape, or form, and that is just a fact, right? So that the establishing identity won't be about me physically at all.
Yeah.
In the very so it's the way in which we bake in as an industry to ensure that we get better at making sure that we can actually establish and authenticate, to use the word, and that's not just about me personally, it's also about the machine-to-machine environments as well.
Yeah, and I talked about this the other day with a person. We were talking about, you know, how do we improve cybersecurity in the future? And, you know, today, if you go to school, you know, our kids going to school aren't really necessarily taught cybersecurity. It's not a class that they teach. So one of the initiatives we've been doing for over 10 years is called Internet Safety for Kids and Family. We've trained over 2 million children, teachers, parents on how kids can become good digital citizens, because the next generation is who's going to have to take on this when they do the Web 3.0 and the metaverse. They're going to be the ones who are doing it. Sure. You know, it's not going to be the older generation likely. So teaching them the proper way to use technology, the proper way to deal with trust. You know, their person isn't going to be their identity, right? How are you going to identify a human in the future? It's going to be very difficult. Because a lot of that stuff is going to be technology-based. Technology will always have vulnerabilities that can be exploited and taken advantage of by malicious actors. So, but yeah, let's concentrate on the next generation and get them going.
You know, definitely true. I think that future scares me. I'm not going to lie. I think I might be a little too old for that not to be anything other than scary. But, you know, I actually think history is useful, you know, just looking back on sort of the advent of the web, where people didn't have security in mind at all. No. And so they built an entire network without even an inkling of security. Everything was about just connecting networks, right? And so we built this entire world, and now we've spent, you know, if you think about since the beginning of the web, we've started slowly build stuff on top of it. We've slowly started to secure it. Yeah. I think the difference of a Web 3.0 is that you are absolutely going to still make mistakes. There's absolutely going to be things that are not secure, but they're not coming at it as potentially naively as the founders of the web were at the time, which is, you know, perfectly appropriate for the time. They at least know that there is this thing out there that can be abused, that can be exploited in various ways. And so my hope is that the learning curve is a little bit shorter. It doesn't mean that people won't make mistakes, there won't be attacks, but at least they're going to be a little bit more prepared.
Yeah, but when we talk about attack, we always see an attack, but there are other things happening on the internet now, like illicit trade, $2 trillion economy growing exponentially, which is going to move to the metaverse, by the way, because the metaverse is the next destination. When you talk to the new generation and say, my avatar will be me, as you say, and I will send that avatar to participate into conferences, to access education. I don't need to do it myself. I'll let the avatar be me doing that, and after return to me all the information he has collected on the metaverse. It sounds great, but we know people that have been in cybersecurity for many years that this is actually wishful thinking, that this is going to be a serious problem on how we're going to have our virtual identities transferred to the metaverse. I would like to open maybe the floor. I don't know if we cover all the issues or all the points that you think we need to cover. If you have any other you can raise that you would like to participate. Otherwise, maybe we can open the floor to any questions that you might have from the audience. Don't feel intimidated, just any question. Yeah.
Because you work with the United Nations, and maybe do you think there's a chance to enable the governments to collaborate more if it comes from there, or the business as usual of the UN?
No, I mean, the UN, it needs to be differentiate the political UN in New York with the specialized agencies, which are mainly in Geneva, right? And they have a very concrete mandates, you know, like WHO on health, ITU on telecommunication. Yeah, but the United Nations has, for instance, some kind of centralized cybersecurity unit. In Geneva is the United Nations International Computing Center that provides cybersecurity.
The answer is no.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a short answer, yes, it's no.
Actually, I'm not sure I fully agree with that. I think, you know, the UN has actually tried to do a bunch of things, right? So they've open-ended working group, and you have the group of government experts, and you have all of these sort of things that have been set up to help develop some of the norms. I think the UN is a complicated organization for lots of reasons that many people probably know well, and I think just because.
Can we envision a better one, like you were saying? Yes, now there are the group of Canada, but can we envision a better way?
You know, I think progress can be made. You know, maybe let's go optimistic there, right? I don't. Do I think every single government? Do I think Russia is going to sign up for a set of principles that's put out? Maybe not. But maybe there's still development. There's still positive things that can happen from it.
But also, you know, we're seeing now something we never saw before, right? So with a cyber war happening, hopefully that opens up the channels of discussion and collaboration, because it's not going to be the last time we see this, unfortunately. As we know, the world is going to do things, right? I'm hopeful that it will get better, but the biggest challenge you're going to be is, can we get all countries? And that's, I'm pretty doubtful that.
This will be with more countries.
More countries, okay.
I mean, look, let's not, history is important here in many respects. What was it, 1863, when the first Geneva Convention came in, you know, it happened, right? And then it was modified consistently. So these things are possible, and Geneva Convention that exists at the moment, you know, has you know, I know it's not quite UN, and I'm not so good on which institution does what, but look, what I'm saying is that there are institutions there. There is a precedent there for organizations coming together, recognizing that there are things and lines that you know, for humanitarian reasons shouldn't be crossed. So I am optimistic. I'm sort of slightly in a situation where I wish more had happened now already, but I think, as John and Alissa were saying, the conflict perhaps brings this more to the fore, and perhaps, you know, gives us an opportunity to accelerate.
One thing on the UN, I mean, the UN are mainly analog organizations. They are in the process of getting digital, but the process is slow, as they are, you say, they are complex organizations represented by the entire world. So every country vote counts, and reaching consensus is difficult. But I think, for instance, Brad Smith this morning with the digital convention, the Geneva Digital Convention, to trying to stimulate the same convention that helped peace and security around the world to be brought to the internet. We are talking also about the Human Commission on Human Rights to create the digital human rights, which does not exist. We also, we have human rights to protect ourselves as a human, but what about this avatar that we're going to create in the future? What about if we create those processes? So it's a discussion in progress, and I think they're doing a great job to make it happen, yeah.
What I would say is that there's no shortage of multinational organizations, and I think the more interesting question for me is where each comes in, right? So I think the UN has a role at that very high level in areas like norm building, etc. But I think what's really important for cyber policymakers and the cybersecurity community as a whole is to explore the full spectrum of different entities and cooperative bodies, and make sure that we are spending the right amount of time and doing the right sort of things within the right institution. Because, you know, all of these different institutions, you know, they want influence as well. They want to make sure that they're covering cyber, but we want to make sure that we're doing that in a really smart way. So, you know, where does the EU come in? Where does, you know, does NATO just protect NATO networks? Or does it have a much broader remit, right? So there's all these sorts of questions, but I think actually a lot of what we see going on when it comes to cooperation in cybersecurity is amongst, say, computer emergency response teams, and it's a completely different thing as well. So I think it's just making sure we focus on the right areas, and we maximize the utility of each international organization.
So I think our metaverse friends are having fun there. Not all. You have, exactly, you're a metaverse cybersecurity friend. Thank you very much. So any further questions, please, to the panel? Yeah, go ahead, Gunther. Yeah.
Now, you're all talking about the very dramatic things at the global scale. I'm going to now talk about the dramatic things at my family scale. When my son of 13 says, "Dad, I've learned how to hack my teacher's mailbox," what do you do? I mean, where's the ethics? I mean, because we have a young generation, and I put it in a different context, that doesn't think that hacking is such a bad idea. It's fun. And yet they learn it, and they even have courses on YouTube and that teach you how to do it. You know, so I think, I mean, I was shocked. I mean, he's 13, huh? And he showed me how he hacked his teacher, and you know, and he was proud of it. He thought Dad was going to be proud of it as well. Well, to be honest, deep inside, I said, "Wow, I wish I could do that. I could have done that." But on the other hand, I'm saying, "My God, you know," because he's not the only one. The whole class had fun doing it, and so I just want to be questioning the ethics in education. You know, where is it? Because it clearly is not considered by the young generation as being something very bad all the time.
I would actually push back on that slightly, because I think we need to destigmatize hacking. Because there's a lot of the cybersecurity industry is red teaming, it's testing defenses, and to do that.
And if I just may, MIT has a course about hacking, and yeah, so I just wanted to underline that I agree with you.
Yeah, so that's the point though. So that as a skill set, it is something that we should be encouraging, but it's how we do it in the right way. And going after a school or your teacher isn't the right way to do it. So it has to be ethical. We have to make sure, I think for me, that we're not just bringing out that skill set, but we're capturing the career pathways. You know, how often do we see on the news some kid getting into some really serious trouble, right? And I always think that is in part their fault, but it's also in part a failure of our education system to not bring people through into legitimate cybersecurity career pathways. You know, cybersecurity is not like becoming an accountant or a lawyer where you do your auditing course and you become a chartered accountant, and there's that well-trodden path. And people don't quite understand how to get into the industry, and that leads to people going off track, and that's really important.
Well, and just recently you saw a couple of UK youths targeting a couple of big multinational companies and was able to get into and hack into the companies. So again, where are these kids being taught? And I think, you know, if you think about the kids today, they have places to go to play sports, right? I can go and find a ballpark or a soccer field and I can go play. They don't have a cyber range or a capture the flag program that they can really go and do it. MIT might have a capture the flag program for from children. I think that's pretty good. Carnegie Mellon has one. But we need to build more of these capabilities to take the stigma out that hacking is bad. Teach them how to hack, but then also teach them the ethics that, you know, hacking a company is probably not a good thing. Hacking into a simulation and doing it in a simulator is probably a better thing to do versus that. So, and again, I go back to our Internet Safety for Kids and Family program that we have access, you know, around the world for people to take, get educational materials. We teach them how to become good digital citizens. So that's, but we need more of that.
I would just add, and I know we have a question over there too, but I would just add that, you know, I don't think it's any different than other kinds of things, right? You know, is your 13-year-old son joyriding? Think about all of the things that people have done over the course of the world as young kids. You know, they're not always thinking about what is ethical. They do things that seem like they're fun for one reason or another. And that's essentially, you know, you have to teach them that no, those things are not okay. You have a problem. We have agreement within society that certain actions are appropriate and certain actions are not. And I think that's John's point. I think those are things we teach. And it's not that you say don't do things on the computer, never learn to hack. It's that you teach the ethics along with it, which is a sort of critical piece. And that's no different than other fields as well.
And I would just like to add, as an educator and also as a mother, that the responsibilities doesn't lie only with the school, but also with the parenting for the ethics, and accountability is on both sides.
That's true. That's true. Thank you. Another question here, please.
Hi, thank you. So I have a comment and then a question. So just to comment on Gunther's question, was that there's obviously white hat hackers and all these various color code system, which I don't actually understand, but there are some hackers who are good and they have these skills which prevents, you know, various, like I think there was a ransomware many years ago where there was a surfer who was a hacker who actually ended up discovering how to patch the system. So I think learning this at a young age is very, very good thing. And there's also that book by Neil Stephenson, Bringing in Metaverse, called Snow Crash, which talks about hackers and disabling you know, these kind of generation of hackers. So that's just a comment. But my question more is towards warfare and healthcare. So how do we kind of enable, say, telehealth and these early response, remote response systems which can help in places like the Ukraine war?
So I actually think that's one of those areas where I think all of the pieces that we've talked about are really relevant, because I think we need systems that enable systems that enable telehealth. And I think if you talk to folks like the Cyber Peace Institute over there, they can tell you that actually that hospitals, for example, are attacked with cyber attacks all the time. And it's in fact, it's incredibly dramatic. I bet we could get a statistic if I pass my microphone over.
4 a day, I think. Is that right, Stefan? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's I think we have to recognize that those things happen, and then we have to build capabilities. So we have sort of a range of different possibilities. We have capabilities that we need to build. We have norms that we have to build to say, hey, that's actually not okay. I'm going back to the ethical piece, and we have to think about how those pieces fit together, right? And I think that's almost the same as any other industry. I think the same kinds of principles apply.
You know, we released a research report recently about 2030 and what we're going to see in 2030. And cyber physical implants that are for healthcare we're going to start recognizing those and seeing those coming about. So I mean, and then during the pandemic, obviously telehealth was tremendous, and it was a great opportunity for people to get access to their healthcare provider just through the internet. Again, but in a cyber warfare, the integrity and the availability is what's going to be a challenge for some of these people. If the countries that's attacking takes out their internet, then it's going to be trouble getting access. But again, there's ways around that. Again, you go to 4G, 5G, 6G or whatever instead of Wi-Fi, and so, but I do think technology is going to improve in the future for that, to help it, and just keep improving over time.
So certainly one of those areas within the norms that healthcare makes that, and I think that's why the Peace Institute, the Cyber Peace Institute, has been such an important player there in raising awareness of that. And I think that and those attacks that we talk about, not just hospitals and other healthcare facilities, but we also saw during the pandemic, a lot of targeting on those organizations that were trying to develop the vaccines as well. So, I mean, this is an area where if there's one place you could point at, from a humanitarian point of view, where the norms really need to be accelerated and implemented, it's just that. And I'm sure that we all in this room, and pretty well everyone, can see that there is absolutely a mutually beneficial position there, that should be off limits.
Any other question? Comments?
Transhuman future. So it was said here, and actually you mentioned that there will be the same problems in Web3. I beg to differ. I think we will have problems, but different. And maybe by 2030 we may have the quantum, which will wipe out all this discussion. And so, as such, we must be prepared probably for a bit more. Plus, right now I think blockchain is very useful for deep fakes. It can, because you can have your identity verified and certified. So technology is evolving, is helping as well, but also, yes, we have to be prepared, and I do not know if we can.
Well, the good news is 6G is coming eventually, and that is being built upon security. Security is a proponent of 6G, so it'll be much improved compared to 4 and yeah.
Well, and other things down the road. You mentioned quantum, right? We're probably all working on post-quantum computing now, right?
Yeah.
We're working on post-quantum encryption. We're trying to figure out how you build those systems out so that you can protect in the future. So it is time to think about some of those pieces now. That doesn't mean all of the answers are developed already, but the more you can start thinking about them, the better off you are.
There are actually some, I think in the next couple of weeks, some quantum algorithms available, encryption algorithms are actually available, which are going to be coming out. So that certainly we're there now. We've got the small matter of key distribution that we have to deal with when it comes to quantum as well. So security in the post-quantum world, I think people have been thinking about doing quite a lot with already, and how we obviously protect information now that is protected as it is with sort of 256-bit encryption in that quantum world. So there's a lot that's already been thought about in that. It's only very nascent. We're only just starting there, which I think is important. So quantum, has a lot. I think.
In the context
Yeah, and challenges which we've had, which we can continue to have and work through as well. I think 6G as well, interesting, some stuff around the IP addressing and how that's going to work as well within that environment. So I think there's good and bad there. So we need to think about that, and standards in the ITU especially, you mentioned earlier on about how we deal with those. So, we can really bring this out to many different areas in terms of, but we're at the core of it, back to that ethical humanitarian approach of what are those norms, and as we've seen that played out right now, and also that multi-stakeholder approach, not just multilateral approach as well, I think is going to become ever increasingly important, because as you rightly say, there are going to be those people who are working on those very specialist things that need to be brought right to the fore, put into the standards bodies, make sure that they then actually get adopted universally, because as we can see collectively in this room here, what's at stake if we don't get this right is that we undermine the things that we live our lives with every day now.
Absolutely, and all the company, including Wisekey, is working on post-quantum for microchips. We will be post-quantum microchip enabled by the end of the year. So I think the hope is that human nature has been 200,000 years here, and we knew how to handle all the disasters, earthquakes, tsunamis, wars, and we are still here. So we are very confident that with collaboration and interoperability and multi-stakeholder approach, that's why I think the Tech Accord is a very good example on how companies, and they are competitors or they are frenemies as we call them, they are now willing to work together for the same cause, is a very likely model that needs to be replicated or reinforced, the reason why we're organizing this event. Any further questions?
And the transhumans will transcend
Yeah.
civilization. They will not have conflict.
Hopefully, God bless. Yeah, please.
You need to ask Brad Smith. I think he's left the room, so he'll be back, I'm sure, and around later on.
No, he was before, and actually that book is a very interesting book, because that happened before the war in Ukraine, and a lot of the concepts.
Nobody's read it.
I did.
Could you give us, I know that this is a big book, and you can't summarize it in 30 seconds, but maybe give me your opinions about what
I mean, the substance of the book is like, and I can give you an analogy. When fire was discovered by the primitive man, then saw the ray burning, and then he realized that he could get born, and he could warm first, and then he cooked the animal, and he thought it was a great discovery, and he took the fire and brought to the cave to show to the wife and kids, and actually he killed everybody. Why? Because there was CO2, and the cave got it without oxygen. So it took a few incidents like that before that caveman realized that you have to bring a chimney and let the CO2 expand, and then you will benefit from the benefit of technology. I think this book says that, basically. Then technology can be like fire, it can warm you, it can burn you, it depends how you use it. So it is actually we as a human to be able to master the technology, the solution, and that requires a lot of interoperability, a lot of this kind of meeting, a lot of cooperation. But I'm sure, I am confident, I'm optimistic that we will get there. We will find the chimney of the fourth industrial revolution. Please, sir.
Regarding the, I'd like to comment on the quantum question. There is this fear of, or the notion of harvesting now and decrypting later. If you've heard about it, there is hacker attacks going on, stealing data which is encrypted, which you can store for years, and then you can decrypt later. So is that scaremongering? Is that a real problem? Are there solutions around that which we can deploy right now?
Well, certainly, one of the first things that most malicious actors are going to do is steal data, right? And so if that data happens to be encrypted, that's one method to secure data today, is so let's encrypt it. But if you can steal that data and then wait for technology in the future that can decrypt it, it's obviously a valid thing. I don't know if you can decrypt it today, because you need a decryption key to do a lot of that, what we have today. The thing I worry more about in terms of a cyber warfare or hybrid warfare is the malicious actors who get into the networks planting backdoors for future use. So, and that future use could be done for monetary gain, or it could be done for a nation state to get back access to those networks. that's where I'm thinking about today more than quantum computing coming in and ruining the decryption process or the encryption process.
The other thing I would add, actually, we've started to deploy and test post-quantum encryption. So just as an example, yes, there are things that you can do now. I think the reality, though, is we're probably still a ways off from actual decryption. So think about what that actually means in practice, what you suggested. The information has to be valuable enough, 5 or 10 years down the road, at minimum, to be able to decrypt it. I mean, and it's a big storage cost, right? If you're storing a bunch of content, if you're storing a bunch of data. So it's not that it's impossible. I think it's just that going back to the sort of question about where the most concerns are, it would have to be an incredibly valuable data set for someone to do that and to think that far ahead, right?
I think the other thing to say there is, for threat groups that are able to gain access to a network, move laterally within that network, escalate privileges, obtain that data and exfiltrate it, they're normally through that process able to get access to the plain text data. So, I completely agree. I think it's not something that is, I don't think it's going to be a huge strategic concern. I think there might be some instances where that happens, but I think for the most part, threat groups are able to do that as part of the operation. I think to Alyssa's point, it's probably more around the likes of, an OPM style target where that long-term, intelligence value and that the collection there has huge kind of exciting potential for threat groups, but there aren't too many of those targets around.
Just like a comment going back of the role of the United Nations and international law. Remember that international law works in consensus. In the United Nations, we work in consensus. Even though we were talking about the Geneva Conventions, we have a consensus on the Geneva Conventions, but not in the additional protocols. And we all know that the additional protocols are important, but they have not the same issue. I think what you referred before, that we need to leave every organization with their own mandate to work together, is what the World Trade Organization did 20 years ago, the idea of the spaghetti bowl. You have to take everyone inside with a minimum consensus, then when you have everyone inside, you start to, to refine and to go, better and better. And at that time, China was a case. I mean, how we bring China into the World Trade System. I think we will have to do the same. I mean, we need to find this minimum consensus and start to work. And I'm at the Dean of the University for Peace of the UN, and I really would like to jump on the issue of the education. That is super difficult. I mean, this topic of, because you mentioned, I mean, it's not family, it's not education, but again, what is the consensus on education about technology and how powerful it is as a tool? And connected with social media, what we transmit, I think is one of the big elements of innovation that we need to work in to develop these new tools. Thank you.
Because I'm also a professor of computer science, so I wanted to mention this. This book, I don't know if anyone here read it, Technology and the Virtues by Shannon Valor. And I think, this kind of material to be given, that would be for university students who are in computer science and get the hacking courses, but also for younger kids, yes, from kindergarten we can have those kind of books to educate.
One thing on the international law point, I think it's actually useful to understand how customary international law is built, right? We are talking about norms. We talk about maybe not everybody has signed up to something, but at what point does the additional protocol become customary international law? I think that getting in the really weedy, dirty law stuff, but it's a really interesting question. I think that when we start talking about norms, you are starting to build something where you're trying to build a consensus, where you're trying to build to something that is eventually ends up as customary international law. And I think understanding that not everything is a treaty, that there are a lot of things that are out there that are sort of expectations of behavior that aren't all everybody has agreed, everybody has signed up, is a really important sort of concept that I think that, again, what are we doing here? We're trying to help sort of build understandings about what companies think are norms in this space.
So there have been several instances of security researchers who reported vulnerabilities that were either sued by the companies or even prosecuted as criminals. And I think one of the issues is that the people in power, they tend not to be technology experts. How do you think, or what can security researchers do to effectively communicate with governments, with the regulators, so that we have common sense regulation that on the one hand, doesn't go too far, but on the other hand, does result in effective regulation that both protects companies and encourages them to be more secure.
Yeah, so TrendMicro has an organization called the Zero Day Initiative, which is a bug bounty program, and we do a pawn to own event. We just had it last week in Vancouver, and the reason we do it in Vancouver is because some of the laws in other regions aren't as conducive for these vulnerability researchers to submit bugs. So one of the things we do is obviously through our bug bounty program, we have the researchers send them to us, and then we manage them. You know, we work with the Microsofts and the Adobes to ensure that their bugs are responsibly disclosed. But I think I did see there was some new law that just came about that may help in this instance. But there's definitely some more things that we can do. We have to definitely make it easier for researchers to be able to share their research and their information. We also saw, you know, somebody did some pen testing against an organization and they got arrested. So there are things like that that need to be clarified and probably improved. But again, that's going to have to be discussed at a policy level.
One thing I will say actually for the Tech Accord, so one of the things that came up early in the Tech Accords, the Tech Accord sort of existence was the idea that every company should have a vulnerability disclosure program. So, you know, a lot of us actually, you know, we have a bug bounty program. We have, you know, I bet every company has a vulnerability disclosure program because it is really important. We all sort of recognize the sort of security implications. I think the government has sort of moved in that direction. I think the questions of liability and changing laws are a little bit more challenging. But again, I think you get a lot of consensus here that those are important components of security.
Any further question? Mark? Okay. So, yeah, so we are at the end of this roundtable. I think just maybe an applause to the speaker. They have done a great job. So, start with that. I think the Tech Accord, Brad Smith mentioned, 150 members already, companies from all the dimensions and all nationalities. We are working together, we are sharing data together, we are helping each other. I think this is the model for the future, interoperability, multi-stakeholder approach. So we have many viewers viewing us from the internet, so we encourage them to approach the Tech Accord. To benefit from the data also on the website, there's a lot of documentation available that help companies to just start, if they don't, or individuals, to get acquainted with cybersecurity. And we will continue in Davos and other places to create the right awareness. And I think the world is very well described here. We have the people having fun and the people talking serious things. So this is the world that we are facing. You need to have people talking and thinking about serious things in order that the others can continue laughing. Exactly, on the virtual world. So thank you very much again for your presence. I know that you guys are so busy in Davos, so thank you for sharing your time and experience with us. Thank you for the audience to be here.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you for being a great moderator.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Very good. So,
Thank you very much. It was great. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Nowadays, everybody speaks about the metaverse, but currently this technology is not mature and we don't know yet exactly how it will look like. Will the metaverse be more like a virtual reality or an augmented reality? It's not clear yet. But what's clear already is that the first question should be for each user, what's in it for me? For me, human being, how my humanity will be impacted by the use of the metaverse. And when we can partially answer this question using the experience of Second Life or online games. And we see that actually if the metaverse is a kind of virtual reality, probably we will have two opposite scenarios, two different ways. One would be, I would say, the opposite of Plato's allegory of the cave. You know, this allegory of the cave is more or less the scenario of Matrix. And in Matrix, Neo, who's there, the philosopher, just is aware that our word is just a fake word and discovers reality behind and then comes back to the Matrix to save the people. And do we think that we will do exactly the opposite way, go the opposite way and go in a kind of virtual paradise like a drug, I would say, deceiving our senses to make life more beautiful. And in such a case, like in the movie Ready Player One, the question is who will benefit from it in the real life? But on the other side, this virtual reality could also be a kind of appendix of our life, an added room which will give us just more room to evolve and more room to be powerful to do things. And in such a case, it could be very beneficial. But if the metaverse looks more like an augmented reality, the same, it could be good or bad. And the danger would be to have a kind of additional layer on the reality around us to make our life shining. And there's a scenario from the Red Team. You know, the Red Team is this team of thinkers gathered to imagine the next wars. And this scenario is based on the inability of users of the metaverse to face a naked reality once the metaverse is unplugged. So it does mean that at some point it will be difficult to face reality just once we don't have anymore this technological filter, I would say, from the metaverse. So that's the dark side, but the bright side would be to have a kind of metaverse as an additional feature who will empower us and provide us just like an augmented reality so we can do more and still being in our life and flourishing in our life. So all those scenarios, I would say, ask the question of our identity, personal and collective identity, how it will be impacted by the metaverse. Mark Zuckerberg says that the metaverse is an embodied version of the internet where you don't just consult content, you're in it. What does it mean? Does it mean that we will have one identity for each metaverse or one identity for all of them? How will we structure our collective identity? We see the creation of packs and tribes in games. What will be valuable online? That's a question. And will it be related to our avatar? We can think so. But in such a case, how it will impact our relationship with the others? The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas says that we have a responsibility when we're facing another human being. That's what we say when we say to someone else, tell it to me face to face. But what does it mean if I'm facing a unicorn? In such a case, I mean, perhaps I will not feel so committed in the relationship, I will not feel so responsible. And we see, unfortunately, the first cases of sexual harassment in the metaverse, and this is very terrible. But we need to keep in mind that actually it comes from the mindset of games where we kill other players. So we need to think about it carefully and just I would say educate people just to be sure that the metaverse will not be a game where you can behave improperly with anybody and do anything you want, but a place where people take care of the others. Good morning, everyone. Nowadays, everybody speaks about the metaverse, but currently this technology is not mature and we don't know yet exactly how it will look like. Will the metaverse be more like a virtual reality or an augmented reality? It's not clear yet. But what's clear already is that the first question should be for each user, what's in it for me? For me, human being, how my humanity will be impacted by the use of the metaverse. And when we can partially answer this question using the experience of Second Life or online games. And we see that actually if the metaverse is a kind of virtual reality, probably we will have two opposite scenarios, two different ways. One would be, I would say, the opposite of Plato's allegory of the cave. You know, this allegory of the cave is more or less the scenario of Matrix. And in Matrix, Neo, who's there, the philosopher, just is aware that our world is just a fake world and discovers reality behind and then comes back to the Matrix to save the people. And do we think that we will do exactly the opposite way, go the opposite way and go in a kind of virtual paradise like a drug, I would say, deceiving our senses to make life more beautiful. And in such a case, like in the movie Ready Player One, the question is who will benefit from it in the real life? But on the other side, this virtual reality could also be a kind of appendix of our life, an added room which will give us just more room to evolve and more room to be powerful to do things. And in such a case, it could be very beneficial. But if the metaverse looks more like an augmented reality, the same, it could be good or bad. And the danger would be to have a kind of additional layer on the reality around us to make our life shining. And there's a scenario from the Red Team. You know, the Red Team is this team of thinkers gathered to imagine the next wars. And this scenario is based on the inability of users of the metaverse to face a naked reality once the metaverse is unplugged. So it does mean that at some point it will be difficult to face reality just once we don't have anymore this technological filter, I would say, from the metaverse. So that's the dark side, but the bright side would be to have a kind of metaverse as an additional feature who will empower us and provide us just like an augmented reality so we can do more and still being in our life and flourishing in our life. So all those scenarios, I would say, ask the question of our identity, personal and collective identity, how it will be impacted by the metaverse. Mark Zuckerberg says that the metaverse is an embodied version of the internet where you don't just consult content, you're in it. What does it mean? Does it mean that we will have one identity for each metaverse or one identity for all of them? How will we structure our collective identity? We see the creation of packs and tribes in games. What will be valuable online? That's a question. And will it be related to our avatar? We can think so. But in such a case, how it will impact our relationship with the others? The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas says that we have a responsibility when we're facing another human being. That's what we say when we say to someone else, tell it to me face to face. But what does it mean if I'm facing a unicorn? In such a case, perhaps I will not feel so committed in the relationship, I will not feel so responsible. And we see, unfortunately, the first cases of sexual harassment in the metaverse, and this is very terrible. But we need to keep in mind that actually it comes from the mindset of games where we kill other players. So we need to think about it carefully and just I would say educate people just to be sure that the metaverse will not be a game where you can behave improperly with anybody and do anything you want, but a place where people take care of the others. And all those questions bring us to the political impact of the metaverse, and especially impact on the sovereignty, because we see that it's not only a place where content, and we know more or less how to moderate content on networks, even if it's not properly done all the time. But we know that we can have algorithms and content moderators, but moderating behaviors is very different than moderating contents. And actually, first, very difficult to monitor everything people says and does and so on. But moderating behaviors, it's called ethics. So it means that we need to create an ethics of the metaverse. Who will be responsible for that? Who will carry the legal responsibility of the behaviors in the metaverse? That's another question. And if in the context of the Twitter takeover, we need to ask also the question, who will own those words? Because perhaps we're just facing currently the creation of private realities where you can be admitted or not, like in a club. What does it mean just to be expelled from one portion of the reality? And how the interoperability of the metaverses will work? Will we have one avatar only? And if yes, who will manage it? And it asks the question of the digital identity. And actually, the digital identity will be the key to the connection between our real life and our multiple life in metaverses. And that will be the difficult point for the development of those metaverse. And with this digital identity comes all the data collection about each user, each identity. And we know that on the metaverse, everything can be collected, not only your words, your behaviors, but also what you look at each time. And so all of that can be processed by cognitive neurosciences and used for marketing. Who will be responsible for that? Not only about the behaviors, but also the way those universes will be ruled, and who will own the intellectual property. All of that, they are key questions, and they are not limitations to the development of the metaverse. I'm sure that a lot of things can be done, but they are issues that have to be addressed to be sure that we build a metaverse with a real serenity.